As a German citizen, I of course have an identity card which I need to use to identify myself to government and law enforcement officials, which, if I'm going to be honest, does sound quite Orwellian. But just how Orwellian is it? And how do I feel about it? I'll not give away any spoilers at this stage, but I will say that so far I haven't been arrested by the secret police for laughing at a satirical cartoon. The first thing I had to do when I gained my German citizenship was to apply for an ID card, which all German citizens aged 16 or over are required by law to possess unless they have a passport. And notice that I said possess here. That is going to become relevant later. It's a credit card sized card, and it has on it my photograph, my name, my date and place of birth, my signature, my registered address, and for some reason my height and eye color. It also has a chip with all of that information on it, plus some extra information such as my fingerprints. And well, that is a lot of information, including my registered address? What's that about? If you're a resident in Germany, you have to register your address with the local authorities. What that means is that whenever you move to a new address, you have, in theory, 2 weeks to go to your local citizen's office and register your new address. Failure to do so is a misdemeanor. I say in theory because in practice the authorities can be quite relaxed about it if you register a little bit late. Moving is stressful and complicated, and bureaucracy is quite low on the list of priorities, and in big cities particularly it can be a long time before you even get an appointment. So long as the authorities don't think that you're actively trying to evade justice or something like that, they'll probably just turn a blind eye, or maybe charge you a small administrative fee and then drop their case against you. But your officially registered address is printed on your ID card, as well as being stored in a government database, which I admit does give off distinct surveillance state vibes. On the other hand, it does have a lot of advantages. For example, here in Germany, I don't need to register separately to vote. If I am eligible to vote where I've registered my address, then I'm automatically on the electoral roll. When there is an election, I am sent a notification, which I take with me, along with my ID card just in case there's any uncertainty. And yes, we have voter ID in Germany. It works because, at least in theory, everyone has ID, so nobody is being excluded or forced to go through any extra bureaucracy. Just to be clear, your identity is not being associated with your vote. They just need to check that your name is on their list and that you haven't already voted, and then they just give you an unmarked ballot paper. Other routine tasks can be simplified using this ID card. For example, in my native UK, if I wanted to open a bank account, I would have to find some way of proving my address. The usual option would be to bring along a couple of recent utilities bills with my name and address on them. But that's not much help if I'm not the one who pays for the utilities, or if I've only just moved into the area. In Germany, you just show them your ID card. That's it. And travel is also a lot easier. When traveling within the EU and the Schengen area, and also for short trips to Turkey, I don't need a passport. My ID card will suffice. And by the way, yes, even within Schengen, you do need to have a passport or an ID card with you whenever you cross a border. There aren't supposed to be any routine checks, but you still need to have one of those documents with you. And of course, since it has a chip, it can be used in conjunction with a phone that has NFC enabled to positively identify you online, which means that it should be possible to conduct at least some official government business over the internet. If only the German government was a bit more advanced in its implementation of this technology. And if only when it did implement this technology, it would actually work properly. There is, though, one very common misconception that I need to clear up here, which is that in Germany, you need to have ID with you at all times. That would be a very serious issue for tourists who don't necessarily have a nice credit card-sized ID card and so would have to carry their passports with them everywhere. Remember how I stressed that citizens are required to possess an ID card or a passport? There is no general requirement in Germany to carry ID with you all the time. It is enough that you own one or both of these documents. There are two main exceptions to this. One is people who are carrying a weapon. They must also carry ID. The other is those who are working in industries where people are frequently employed illegally. That's, for example, construction, hotel and catering, prostitution, security, and so on. And in those cases, you only need to carry ID with you when you are actually at work, just to make that clear. The Act to Combat Undeclared Work and Unlawful Employment includes a list of the affected industries. But if you're using public transport, you may need to bring a passport or an ID card with you. The Deutschland ticket and train tickets bought over the internet are technically only valid in conjunction with one of these documents. And it is rare, but yes, I have once or twice been asked to show my ID card when using my Deutschland ticket. This is not a legal requirement, by the way. It is just the terms and conditions of those types of ticket. But if you are stopped by police who ask for your ID and you don't have it, do not despair. First of all, it's not random. Police are supposed to have an actual reason for wanting to check your identity. For example, they have reasonable grounds to suspect that you may have committed a crime. And secondly, although an ID card is the easiest way to establish your identity, there are actually other methods. You do have to give the police your name, address, date and place of birth, and nationality. But you've probably got something on you that confirms at least some of this information, and they have ways of checking for the rest. Of course, if you're in serious trouble and you make life unnecessarily difficult for the police, you're probably going to end up paying a fine. But I'm sure none of you are going to want to tempt fate in that way. Incidentally, most EU countries, though not all of them, issue similar ID cards, and they are likewise valid everywhere in the EU. If you're from a non-EU country, you won't have one. But if you have an electronic residence permit, that will allow you to identify yourself online just as a real ID card does. Which at least means that you can do some of the bureaucratic things you need to do online. In theory, anyway. All of this is fantastic, but still, so much information about me stored in a government database. Isn't that a bit sinister? I grew up in a country that is so opposed to the idea of ID cards that any government even suggesting such a thing would be committing political suicide. It's the kind of thing that authoritarian dictatorships do. But one of the things that I have come to realize is that even if your government doesn't actually issue identity papers, it still keeps a lot of information about you. If you have ever applied for a passport, got a driving license, paid taxes, or registered to vote, you have given the government all that information about yourself. As a British citizen, I have a national insurance number that uniquely identifies me for the purposes of paying into and using the services of the National Health Service, which is one of the biggest government bureaucracies in the entire world. And it has all of my medical records as well, at least the ones that I generated while I was still living in the UK. Over in America, we're hearing reports that federal agents have been scanning car license plates and then greeting the drivers by name, which is decidedly creepy, but also not surprising. We all know that if you have a car, the government knows about it. And of course, I could now go full-on conspiracy theorist and start talking about all the information that our governments are secretly and probably illegally compiling about us. But let's stop short of that and just get straight to the point that I'm trying to make. Your government has information about you, even if it doesn't issue ID cards and require everyone to have one. I still have mixed feelings about having to have ID, especially since such a system can easily be abused by a corrupt or authoritarian government. On the other hand, nothing bad has ever happened to me, at least not yet, and I have a single card that I know will be accepted everywhere in the EU. That's good to know in those situations where you want to buy something with alcohol in it and the cashier doesn't believe that you're over 18. Who am I kidding? I've never yet met a cashier who thinks I'm not old enough to buy alcohol. Oh, and before I go, if you're new to this channel, I make videos about German life, culture, and history. If that sounds like something you might be interested in, down there is a video that I think you might enjoy.